Hello. This is Michelle Morand, co-founder and director of Cancer Treatment Options and Management. And I'm here today with Cassandra Hui from Heal Mary, a clinical trials support and finding service. And she's going to tell us all about clinical trials and about if that's something that's right for you or the person you want to advocate for, and how to go about getting involved, if so. Welcome, Cassandra.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to get to connect with you. So I have a list of questions that they're things I'm curious about, but they're also specifically questions that I hear a lot when I do these about 10 a week. I do free strategy sessions with cancer patients or their advocates to help answer their general questions about cancer, and clinical trials come up a lot. Like, are they right for me? How can I access them? So really, what I'm asking you today are questions that I hear a lot, and I'm anticipating that these answers will provide a lot of benefit to people. So let's start with you telling me a little bit about Heal Mary.
Absolutely. So Heal Mary started shortly after my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And then in 2017, both of my sisters were diagnosed with cancer.
Wow.
And so it's really after that I pivoted my career from tech into digital health. But more importantly, why I'm very, very focused around a patient-empowered and a patient-centric experience through things like clinical trials.
Yeah. So how does the clinical trial element factor into your own experience? I mean, wow, that's mom and 2 sisters. That's going to push all the buttons, isn't it? In terms of your concern for them, as well as understandably for yourself. So how did you end up going into clinical trials as a result of that?
Absolutely. I think the key for me is, being on the sidelines and a caregiver in essence it's really about being informed. And I wanted to know what type of options would be out there for any of them. And when I started down the clinical trials search, what I realized is how difficult it is for somebody like me who doesn't speak any medical language, who doesn't understand these terms, to know what options we had, especially for my mom at that such a serious stage. I just always wanted to know that they would have options.
Yeah. So it was okay, I've got this tech background. And these guys are going through so much. I'm going to advocate. I'm going to try to find something, but oh my gosh, there's so much out there, and I don't even speak cancerese. How do we even know? And I totally relate. That was ultimately my motivation as well for getting into this work, was a family member's experience and my efforts to learn and advocate for them, and just the quagmire and the confusion and how scary and sad that was.
Yep. And it's such a, it's terrible, but that's the thing that's currently kind of bonding us in the work that we do. And yet it is, it's, I think, very rewarding to become that advocate and to try and make it easier for somebody else's family who's maybe going through the same thing.
Yes, it's true. It is incredibly rewarding for sure. And if the best you and I can do is help make it easier for one person, that's definitely worth it, isn't it? And especially, with what you're working on, this is not just a Canadian-based initiative. This is a global initiative.
It is global. We're primarily, obviously, working in North America, but it is accessible worldwide.
And how long has Heal Mary been doing its thing?
So officially we started in 2019. My sisters were diagnosed in 2017. So it was about 2 years of going through the journey myself before ever launching this platform. But it started in May of 2019.
All right. And you said you have a tech background. So is that like a programming background or?
Yeah, I dabbled in programming. I had a certification in data science. So I have some of that knowledge, but most of my career in tech has been around product management and delivery.
Right. And you have some people who work with you on this in terms of similar things in design development. Tell me a little bit about your team.
Yeah, so what's fascinating about my immediate team is when we started in 2019, we all come from very technical backgrounds. So, our CTO, he has a background in working with HIPAA and building platforms, but it's all technology based. So none of us actually had a background in life science, but we knew we could use our skills to at least help with the process.
Mm-hmm.
And what isn't on our site right now, but we have an internal team of about 10 life science students and people with medical backgrounds who joined us shortly after in the last year, especially when we pivoted to COVID in April of last year, to help us with things like translations from medical jargon to plain language, which is one of the features of our site,
That's great.
and to be able to parse out acceptance criteria and help us build out a lot of the informational packets for patients. So yeah, we're just very strong technologically, but we've had to add people who have the experience in clinical trials to join us.
Sure. Yes. I think that's an excellent point that it's not just about cancer. It like there's all the tech, and then as you say, the communication. That's one of the biggest challenges I found too, is taking the leading research and even helping people to understand what precision oncology is and why it's so much better than what used to be, um, and making that information accessible to people who are were just kind of going about their business doing their thing and suddenly now have to become you know doctors of philosophy of cancer. It's a lot. So it's great that you have a good team behind you with both the tech development as well as making the education accessible. And you mentioned HIPAA, and just for people who aren't familiar with that, it's about information privacy and making sure that the information that we gather on your behalf is kept as safe as it possibly can. So that's what Cassandra and her team are making sure of as you're gathering information.
Absolutely, patient privacy.
Okay, so what is if you had to say the mission statement for your organization, or the ultimate goal of your organization, what would it be?
The ultimate organizational goal is patient empowerment in their own health. And, beyond that, we tie in with SDG goals too, which are just ensuring that good health and equal access for all, gender equality within clinical trials, and equal representation of underrepresented people in trials. So we sort of have that bigger, broader goal that it's patient enablement and empowerment. And then beyond that, ensuring that there's equal access for everybody.
That's so great, because there are issues, aren't there, with ageism and sadly racism at times, and other elements that can really get in the way. And even just again, people having the education and support to know that there's a clinical trial available to them, and how to go about applying.
That's exactly it. And that was my experience. And not only that, my mom, coming from a different generation than me and also being an immigrant to Canada, had a different sense of what her health should look like, and a different element of trust factors when it comes to clinical trials. And so I think there's a much broader topic here, but really just about understanding people's barriers to entry and sort of alleviating that kind of fear, or ensuring access is made readily available so that people can make their own choices.
Yes, there's also a piece. Do you come up against this? We do a lot in CTOAM. I have to do a lot of advocacy training, especially 60 plus, with this belief about you don't question your doctor.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And that's what I'm so interested in the work that you do at CTOAM, because I find, um, do you find that nowadays, though, people are looking for a second opinion and saying, okay, maybe, yes, I definitely trust, but maybe I'm missing something and coming for maybe additional information.
Yes. The thing is, I'll say at least 50% of the time they add a little extra something, but I don't want my doctor to know, or I don't want my doctor to be mad, or my doctor told me not to bother, or there was nothing else. And so, could we do this without them knowing, kind of thing. And people are so relieved when I say, of course we can gather information for you independent of your doctor. There's no barrier, but also we will advocate with your doctor for you. Yeah, because that is such a concern, is that, especially I think in Canada, because of the nature of our healthcare system, people feel like if my doctor is mad at me, he's not going to give me good care. Or if my doctor's mad at me, she's going to stop treating me altogether and I'll be without a doctor, which is not possible or going to happen. So don't you worry about that. But it does come up. So there's this kind of, okay, I've been raised not to question my doctor, or respect authority, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but this is your life, people. So you have every right to be gathering more data. The most important thing, of course, is that it's evidence-based data. So let's talk about where you get your information from, and where do you get your info about clinical trials from?
Absolutely. So we never want to tamper with the source at any point. And so our scraper scrapes from databases like clinicaltrials.gov, any of the global databases that are authorized healthcare information providers. The thing that makes us unique is we then provide technology pieces that make it easier. So we scrape that trial as is and is intended by the researcher, but then we also apply a field over on top of it, an overlay that takes medical jargon and then shows you the actual plain language of what that drug is, or it'll show you the plain language of what that medical jargon means. And then the second feature that we have right now is it automatically parses out acceptance criteria. So a lot of questions we get from patients, well, how do I know I qualify for this? We automatically separate that out so that you can basically go through a checklist with the information that you have. And anything that you're not sure of, we produce a URL for you to be able to share with your oncologist, your practitioners, anyone who's your support who might be able to help further answer those questions for you. So it's really about collaborating with who you have and just optimizing your health outcome for yourself.
Yeah. Wow. You were talking earlier about having the team of students and researchers assisting with making the data more accessible, but I didn't understand that you meant that this is amazing. So you're saying so a scraper, I assume, is something that surfs the net, not being a techie myself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So a scraper basically means it pulls all that data from clinicaltrials.gov, for example, and pulls it into our database.
Okay. All right. And then what you guys have going on is not just the study, but people can kind of click on words or things like that and get like a layperson description. This is what this drug is. This is what this means. Wow. I got chills, because I'm just thinking about, when my uncle was ill all those years ago, and me trying to figure out, what does this even mean? And then, the most frustrating part, aside from not being able to understand that, was you get to the very end somewhere, and somewhere like in small print is not accepting people anymore, or you go through the filling out form and then they tell you, oh, sorry, no, this trial is closed. Yeah. So, that's obviously a fear that people are going to have in terms of pursuing clinical trials. So you've taken care of making sure that it's understandable, and there's hyperlinks to all the extra data, that the acceptance criteria are easy to understand. And now okay, so let's say oh gosh, I'm just so excited. This is so cool. Why don't you walk me through, let's say you existed when my uncle was diagnosed, and I was lucky enough to stumble upon you. What would the process have been from there? If I said I wanted to see what's possible for my uncle, what would I have done?
Yeah, so you would have visited our site, which is healmaryapp.com, and you would have begun the search with really easy onboarding. So we ask you, what did you come here for? And we separate it out currently by cancer or COVID, but you go through the flow of, well, breast cancer, and you dig through that, and it asks you for geography, it asks you for age, it starts to filter out in real time. So you can see it actually separating the clinical trials as you go through this onboarding process. So it'll tell you how many matches you have at that point in the process.
It's kind of like a its own little kind of status bar, right? You see the progress, and hopefully not too many get filtered out, but at least you know now we're really refining criteria for me.
Exactly. And from there, you're able to dig into individual studies, read their description. And that's when all the medical jargon has hyperlinks. You can see clearly that there's a definition there if you'd like. And then you can say, check my eligibility, a little box that says, check my eligibility, and you go through the acceptance criteria. And so you fill out the inclusion, exclusion, and at the end of that flow, we can tell you that you've potentially qualified for this study. Would you like to get in touch? You may not look like you qualify. Would you like us to search again for you? And then any unsure items, we can provide you with a URL for your practitioner that you can copy and paste.
Okay.
So that's the 3 flows. And the other thing is, at any point in time, you actually can click and get in touch with someone from our patient services team, because currently we know single trial matching is very fatiguing, and that's why part of the journey is so difficult.
Yes.
Our next feature, which is hopefully going to be released in the next 6 months, is actually going to be multiple trial matching. So you fill out the acceptance criteria once, and you don't have to do it again. It's starting to match you with trials every single day that come in.
That's great. And so alternatively, right now, I could call your patient services. I got to speak to a real person, and then they could do that multiple trial matching thing with or for me.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's pretty good. If I got that correctly, your program's going to prompt me to enter all the data you need in order to match me as closely as you can, and again, all the hyperlinks for extra info so I can stay educated as I'm going. And then you'll let me know kind of right away. Yeah, you pretty much tick all the boxes here. Shall we proceed with an application? Let's say I do that. Let's say I say yes, please, or sign me up. What happens then?
Yep. So we get you in contact directly with the site or the principal investigator, whoever's listed as the primary contact. And so we will connect you with them to further the process. If you opt in to share your data, if you opt out to share your data, but you still like us to connect you, we're happy to do that. But we never want to, pardon me?
How would that even work? If I said, no, don't share my data, you would, why would I say that for starters?
Yeah, well, to your point, going back to HIPAA and privacy, we know that health is very private to somebody, but at the end, if you prompt to go ahead and ask us to connect you with that study, but not to share your data, we just inform the site that we haven't pre-screened, but we have somebody who's interested in their study.
Okay, and then they'll call. Now, I know back in the day when I was trying to find things for my uncle, I probably called 10 clinical trials. I never got a human. I was like pulling teeth to actually get to speak to somebody. So does this process make it easier for me to actually get to talk to somebody at the other end, like the administrator? I always had such a hard time reaching them.
Absolutely. And so that's part of our role, is to facilitate that dialogue. And so that's why we have it, so that you can either speak to one of our team members to help confirm, or we can put you direct in touch with the clinical trial. And we do follow up after to say, would you like us to continue searching? And that usually is an indicator for us as to whether or not the site's gotten back in touch or not. So we usually can help follow up.
And how quickly after my initial filling out of forms and saying, yes, please connect me, will you follow up with me and find out if someone has reached out?
We usually give about a week, and it's just to give the study site some time to respond back. We never know where their state or progress is at the time. So again, we just want to help facilitate the dialogue, but we don't really want to intervene to that level.
Right.
There are some clients that we actually work with to help them with the pre-screen or the second screen. And so that's where we'll step in to ensure that a patient gets in touch with the site.
Sure. So if I fill in all the forms, go ahead with it. It could be a week before either I hear back from the trial administrator or you follow up with me, but somebody on one side is going to follow up and see if I've had any contact or what next steps I'd like to take. So exactly. Yeah, I'm not lost in the shuffle.
No. And that's exactly to your point. That's one of the things we're really trying to solve for are these drop-offs that happen or these things that we think are quite fixable and quite manageable. And so we've taken on that burden to help facilitate those, because again, our priority is that patients get matched with trials and potentially life-saving treatment. So
yeah. Now, when we were talking to arrange to meet for this interview, you gave me a statistic, which I have shared liberally with great joy, which is, it may have changed since we last spoke. In the world today, I remember you saying there are over 98,000 clinical trials for cancer.
Yes. And that fluctuates at any given time, but it's in the hundreds of thousands of available trials. Yeah.
So, I mean, wow. Like, again, it's just, cancer is such a horrible disease. And one of the things that Alex, my partner here, and we call him the cancer guy, the cancer expert, the science side of things here, often says, it really is that, when you get a diagnosis of cancer, the most important thing you can do as quickly as possible is throw everything you can at it. I could do everything you can to make sure your diagnosis is as accurate as it can be and that you've explored all possibilities. And obviously with, hundreds of thousands or in the 100,000 possible clinical trials, meaning not that there's 100,000 new drugs being tested, but combinations of drugs, right? That's a very new and very popular approach, isn't it? Is kind of mixing, because people have numerous genetic mutations and targeting just one isn't as effective as targeting 2 or 3.
Exactly that. And that's, I think personalized medicine has also made it made trials more vast to that level, is because now there are things that people are customizing for each patient. And so to your point, yeah, it's combinations. We see prevention trials, we see studies. So it's a combination of everything, which is why we're trying to help parse through that, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Now you and I, because we have some more familiarity with this field, you more than me with clinical trials, we've just kind of skipped over something that I think is really important. There will be lots of people watching this who may have an outdated idea of what a clinical trial is, in terms of experimental. So can you just clarify for us, in order for a trial to be used with humans, what needs to have already happened? How can people trust this is safe?
Absolutely. I think the important thing, especially when it comes to cancer, is understanding that the reason why there are such intense acceptance criteria and protocols is they have to guarantee the safety of every patient participating. And so there will never be a point in which they will put a patient's life for anyone who's of dire consequence or chance of disability or anything on their trial. They will not do anything to harm that patient. And so, I think sorry, Michelle, I think I might be skipping questions. I might be going into the idea of being a guinea pig. Or
go ahead and just fill us in whatever's coming to mind about what people, assumptions or biases people might have about clinical trials versus what they actually are these days.
Definitely. Thank you. So I think the misconception is that, it's an experiment I'm being tested on. There's a whole phase of research that has to happen to actually be able to even understand and put this into a clinical trial. So they have to do a bunch of research in advance. They need to be able to test out and get approval on basically preclinical work. And then in the first phases of it, they actually don't even administer the drug or diagnostic tool or medical device right away. It's a small group of healthy volunteers that they will run a trial with, so less than 100 people. And all they're trying to do is see if there's side effects, if there's anything that is alarming or concerning at that point. And then it enters to a phase 2 trial, which is about 100 to 300 patients, typically runs a couple of months to 2 years. That's when they're seeing if the drug is starting to have effects. Does it do anything? Is it showing what they want it to show? And then as it moves forward, again, the next level is to test, okay, well, now do we have any long-term effects? Are we seeing, and it's people with that disease state, so they're testing in real time. And what are the long-term effects? What do we have to be concerned about? And is it actually working against the normal standard of treatment? And so I think the important thing to know is these are not experiments in the sense of they haven't been gone through a rigorous process. It's that there is a potential that they can be better than what is currently standard. And that's what they're really looking for is, will this improve somebody's quality of life, improve their length of life, any of these items to what is already standard. And that's why it's important to know in cancer, the research that's being done will not put any cancer patient at risk. If there's any inclination that it will, they make sure that that's addressed, and then most likely other methods are offered. And I think it's important as a patient to know that, so that when you walk in and you say there's a study that you want to participate in or a trial, I think the patient has the right to ask, if during this process I'm given a placebo or not the actual treatment, do I have an opportunity through the process to switch and be given the treatment? Can I opt in for that? And I think that's a fair question, and they can let you know in advance if that's an option for you.
I was going to ask you about the placebo thing. So let me first back up and make sure I understood what you just said. So essentially there are 4 stages. There's the kind of preclinical-ish research where no people are involved at all. Then we have healthy volunteers, and we're really assessing for any kind of immediate side effects or consequences in it for healthy people, because obviously a cancer patient has a more compromised system and may respond. Then we have like 1 to 300 people perhaps in did you say that was a phase 2 trial?
Yeah.
It might be anywhere from a couple of months to a couple of years long, depending on, I guess, what's being studied. And I know I often see, when Alex is preparing his treatment plans for people, oftentimes he'll be mentioning things like the trial is still in progress, or it's gone so well we don't actually have all the data about how long people are living, right? It's like 2 years on and there's a lot, so we don't actually know what this drug can accomplish for people. And then we have, I guess, phase 3. Is that where we're testing for the long-term effects?
Yes, absolutely, and confirmation.
Okay, and you said, which I love and really want to reinforce for people, being on a clinical trial, it's like you get standard care plus the drug, right? It's not, that's because we're humans and there's laws about experimenting on humans. You're at minimum going to be getting standard care plus a placebo.
Exactly.
If it's one of those trials that has a placebo, but you will get standard care plus whatever the drug is, or a combination. Is that right?
Yeah, they'll not stop your treatment.
Okay, and then I did want to ask about placebo. So do you have an idea in mind, percentage-wise, how many of these, say, 100,000 rough estimate clinical trials for cancer in the world are using a placebo or like a blind trial, as opposed to people knowing for sure they're getting the drug?
Yeah, and I was actually trying to look for a stat, and I couldn't really find anything that was too clear, except a statement, I think it was from cancer.net, that basically says that it's rare in serious diseases like cancer that you would be given a placebo, but there is a possibility that you would be. And then knowing that, to your point, you will get the standard of care. It doesn't mean you get just a placebo.
Yeah.
You get standard care plus the placebo.
Okay, but so we don't necessarily have a number, and please do, if you find one ever, let me know. I'll add it to the description for this video. But really what you're saying is, for the most part, when it comes to cancer, placebos aren't being used. People they're wanting to test the efficacy of this drug, because we kind of already know how standard care works.
Exactly.
For that.
Exactly. It's more the comparison to existing standard of care. So is this treatment or medical device better than what's currently on market? So you're testing against that versus somebody who's just given a plain, placebo and left on their own device. So I think that's sort of what's referring to, is that you'll at least be getting
some
treatment. Yeah.
That is it, that, along with how do I do it and how do I know which one is for me, then, and is it experimental? That's the next question I always hear, is how likely is it I'll land on a placebo? So again, even if so, although it's not very common, you will still be getting standard of care. But we also have a little kind of workaround for telling if people are on a placebo when they're on a clinical trial here at CTOAM, because Alex has designed a treatment monitoring blood test. So we can tell you within 3 weeks of you starting your clinical trial if the treatment is having a significant effect or not. And that's how you can tell, am I still on the same thing I was doing before? Am I getting something else? Or, is it working? So so we're hoping that clinical trial services will be, interested in assisting with that, the uptake of that for sure. But for patients who are just wanting to know, okay, this trial looks really good, how do I know I'm actually on the drug? We have a little workaround.
That's incredible. Again, patient information to be informed about your own health, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, it's knowledge is power, right?
Very much.
Yes, for sure. Let me just have a little snoop through all my list of questions here. You've answered, I think, pretty much everything. So, just to be clear, that process of me going online, filling out the forms on the healmaryapp.com, healmaryapp.com. Pardon the doggies. How that's how you know you're working from home. How long does the form take to fill in, assuming I'm relatively competent with online form filling?
Yeah, so it usually takes up to 15 minutes is what we say, and it depends on the acceptance criteria. So there are studies with 5 pieces of acceptance criteria that'll take you 5 minutes, but the longest we've seen is studies that have really, really dense acceptance criteria, and that takes up to 15.
Wow, that's nothing.
Which is why we've also have.
Sorry,
yeah, well,
cut you off there. We glitched a little. What were you trying?
Oh, I was gonna say that's why we also have a little chat button on the side, because if you're, if that gets daunting, because I think multiple forms. Yeah, no, I'm gonna have someone else determine this for me. So that's why we provide that.
I've spent more time filling out forms for online dating sites. This is amazing. 15 minutes. I can know whether I'm a fit for certain things, which is hope. There's inspiration. I can sleep tonight. So let's say I'm trying to find options for a family member. As long as I have their permission, of course, and their details, is there any barrier to me filling these forms out or going through the process with you? Or does it need to be them?
No, we obviously, we've noted that on our site, a lot of caregivers and advocates will come on behalf, just because it is such a large process. It's quite daunting.
Yeah.
The only thing that we sort of validate at the end is that the patient is aware, again, opting into the sharing of the data and ensuring that they recognize that that they'll be connected with the clinical trial site. So it's an important discussion, and we encourage the caregiver advocate or whatnot to be having that conversation, but we try and validate for sure that the patient is the one who's aware and interested
Right.
again, for privacy and connection rules.
Well, and you also don't, I mean, your team doesn't want to be putting effort and energy into pursuing services for somebody who isn't wanting them as much as the advocate might. We run up against that here, sadly, where, daughters or partners will call and say, I want to do more, but this person wants to follow their doctor's advice, or they don't want to make a fuss, or whatever it is, and I'm sure it's excruciating. But if ultimately they're not going to go ahead with the trial, it's not a lot of purpose in going through with the forms.
Absolutely. And that's why we ensure that the caregiver recognizes, or that there's a way for us to get back in touch with the actual person or patient that will be participating, because it is so important that they are the ones in control of that and choosing to be part of it.
Yeah. Now, one last maybe series or one question. So I know that an assumption that gets made often about clinical trials is that I have to travel. So is that like true across the board? How does that actually look in 2021-ish?
Yeah, so prior to the last year, most trials were done on satellite sites or additional sites. We call additional sites. So large sponsors or whatnot will have multiple locations in different cities so that they can run these trials. And to be able to help recruit from remote areas, they perhaps add on what are known as satellite sites, which is still managed by one PI overall, one investigator or principal investigator overall, and everything remains the same. It just increases access for people who live in remote areas. Right. Since in the last year, what we've seen is a spike and an increase in what are called decentralized trials or remote trials. So the fact that companies are now coming to people's homes to actually run the clinical trial over a certain period of time, or setting up the craziest ones. We did one over COVID that was in a truck, a mobile health truck. And so I think coming out of this into 2022, we may not be seeing a lot of health trucks still on the road still, right. But we will see is a more openness and a more thoughtfulness from people running trials on how we make this convenient for the patient. On average, I think a recent study said that any clinical trial cancer patient can expect to travel about 28.4 miles on average outside of from their home to the site, which is, over a couple of years. Pardon me?
Oh, yes, right. If you're doing it, I see, right. I was thinking one time, no problem. But if this is a regular thing, kind of a pain in the tush.
Absolutely. And that's why it's important to understand and ask questions from the trial investigator. You can ask as many questions as you want. You're the one opting into this. And so one of the questions is, how often will I need to come back to the site? It will be you or your advocate who will have to commute you to the site. So that's important to note. And just how long your commitment is to the study, how long they're expecting you to be committed in advance. So, but yes, on average, a cancer patient will travel about 28.4 miles every time. But we'll see that perhaps shift coming out of this COVID stage into 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I was thrilled with how what I saw in the way of doctors really embracing teleconsults. Like, it's about time. I mean, I understand physical interviews are critical as well to assess wellness and efficacy of treatment. And when it's just a check-in, why does somebody have to drive for an hour or two? So I love that. And this is great that they're recognizing that. So you would coach people to ask them, how often am I going to need to attend and for how long?
Absolutely.
One of the things that we have had the experience of in the last couple of years, especially, is being able to coordinate with clinical trials for a patient's doctor to become a satellite site, or maybe this is what you meant by kind of remote. And I think that's what you're speaking of, is there may be more of that happening now. It might be easy.
For sure. And I love that you brought that up, because we did speak to someone in rural BC. You have to actually kayak to get to this town. from one of the major sites. And one of the doctors there had become a satellite site, so running this trial for a cancer patient. And so what that was so fascinating is because now this remote patient has an opportunity and an option to participate.
Yeah, leading edge life-saving treatment potentially.
For sure.
Yeah. Wow. Yay, I love technology.
Yeah.
Okay, so the only question I haven't asked on my massive list here, and thank you so much, is fees. How much does this cost?
So we are actually free for patients to use. It is my mission, my mandate to continue to keep it that way, because I just understand what it's like to already have enough stresses in your life. That why would we add another financial stress to someone's life? It's not who we are. I will say, however, we are paid by organizations that run clinical trials to help them find matches for their study. So that is how we are compensated, but that also allows us to keep it free for patients.
Sure. And that sounds very reasonable to me, because it's not like you're sending people that aren't a match, or, you're still unbiased in the sense that you're looking out for the client and making sure where they're going is the right place for them. But you're saving them the cost, which is a great gift.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Was there anything you were hoping I would ask you that I didn't, or anything that you want to reiterate that we talked about already?
No, not at all. I love the fact that there are organizations and groups like ours coming together to move this forward. And I think the more that time goes on, people are passionate about their health. And I think what I love about the work that you're doing is it makes it okay for patients to ask more questions or to reach out and get more information. And I think for a long time that maybe wasn't okay. And I just want to say that in this, as we sort of come out of everything that's happening, is that I think a more engaged and more empowered patient is really going to be what comes of all of this.
I think so too. And that will cycle back around, I'm confident, to doctors having more confidence in the quality of the things patients are exploring. Like the more educated patients are, the more valid the tools that they're bringing, right? A lot of times oncologists have a kind of an auto default to, I'm not interested, or there's no merit to this treatment, because so many non-evidence-based treatments are out there. And, with patients not knowing necessarily how to tell the difference between the two, oncologists have seen a lot of crazy ideas come their way.
Oh, for sure. I feel for oncologists and all the things that they have to deal with. And I think that's important, what you've just stated, because I think in our mission is, yes, to enable the patient, but also to save time for oncologists. That's really what we're trying to do.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, statistics show oncologists suffer most from burnout, depression, and suicide of any health professional. And if there's something that we can do to help these people who are on the front lines providing life-saving treatments, to be able to do better, that's exciting. And certainly if we can help clients to have a lot more confidence in the questions they're asking, and also, and this maybe comes back around to our advocacy side of things, but how to hold their oncologist accountable to providing them with the best possible treatment, as opposed to whatever they're most familiar with. But all that is to say, I'm very excited for the service that you offer. It just sounds so incredibly easy for people to find out what is possible for them. And I'm so sorry for what you have gone through with your family. It really touches me. And I'm just so thrilled that you've made such great lemonade out of those lemons. Let's put it that way. And what a wonderful gift.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to just share our story and what we're working on. So I appreciate this.
You're welcome. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Michelle.